The next day, Thomas Cashman takes the stand again. He's seated in the witness box and he's wearing a navy blue jumper over a t-shirt with a tie. He's also wearing navy blue trousers. John Cooper, who's defending him, will resume questioning. First, the judge says, "We are conscious he was quite quietly spoken. I've said to keep his voice up. There's no speaking too loudly in court. If anyone is struggling to hear, give me an indication." Mr. Cooper asks about the witness who cannot be named for legal reasons. Cashman has accepted sleeping with the unnamed witness. Mr. Cooper says, "Did you know she got pregnant?" "No, I didn't know," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you know one way or the other whether that child was yours?" asks Mr. Cooper. "No, I didn't know." "I became engaged to my partner, Kaylee Sweeney, in 2015. You heard the evidence as far as the unnamed witness was concerned. She said this: "I'm going to ruin you like you ruined my whole life." She agreed that was her view, says Mr. Cooper. She went on to say, "He had ruined my life, finished my life. He fucked me." She was referring to her relationship with you. When she said, "I'm going to ruin you," were you surprised to hear her express herself in that way? Asked Mr. Cooper. "Everything she said, what she's done to me, she's ruined my life. She's ruined my partner's life. She's ruined my kid's life. What she said to her mate, she had done to me. My life's been ruined. What she's saying is a lie. She's ruined my life. That's the only thing I can say," says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then refers to the CCTV footage where Cashman is seen on the corner of Finch Lane and of Berryford Road. Mr. Cooper says, effectively, that was going to be the time when you thought of shooting him. "That's not true," says Thomas Cashman. "The Crown's case is you were planning to shoot him, you looked down that street and walked away." "Was that you?" asks Mr. Cooper. "Yes, that was me," says Thomas Cashman. "Were you looking down that street to shoot Joseph Nee?" asks Mr. Cooper. "No, I wasn't. I was on my way to my brother's house. My brother's come out of his house. I've turned round and walked back to the house I've just come from," says Thomas Cashman. "Why were you looking at your brother?" asks Mr. Cooper. "I was on my way to his house, but he doesn't allow me to give his lads cannabis. He comes out of his garden. I've turned round and come back where I've come from," says Thomas Cashman. "My friend used it, the house. I supplies my friends with cannabis who sold it from my brother's house. He didn't agree with it." "Where were you intending to go?" asked Mr. Cooper. "To my brother's house, what's just on the left," says Thomas Cashman. "What stopped you?" asked Mr. Cooper. "My brother," says Thomas Cashman. "Were you intending to walk down that street to shoot Joseph Nee?" asked Mr. Cooper. "No, I was not," says Thomas Cashman. "Were you even scoping the area?" asked Mr. Cooper. "No, I was not. I was going to my brother's house," says Thomas Cashman. Next, Mr. Cooper shows Cashman a picture of the view he would have had at that stage. Mr. Cooper says, "On the right-hand side of the photograph, do we see a house that may have been associated with Joseph Nee?" "It's a house of Timmy Naylor's," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you know that Nee was there?" asked Mr. Cooper. "I was not thinking about Nee when I turned that corner, so I wouldn't know," says Thomas Cashman. "Do you also see your brother's house?" asked Mr. Cooper. My brother's house is on the left-hand side," says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then also asked to circle the two addresses on a printed off copy. He's also asked to circle his brother's car. This is shown to the judge and the jury. The defendant is now shown CCTV stills of him walking around Rothbury Road. He says, "I'm going to be brothers." Mr. Cooper says, "For the reasons you've already given us?" "Yes," says Thomas Cashman. They then show still images of Thomas Cashman seen on the corner of Finch Lane and Berryford Road. "You say you saw your brother," says Mr. Cooper. "As soon as I seen him, I turned round and walked back," says Thomas Cashman. The CCTV footage is then played to the court. "We can see it raining," says Mr. Cooper. "Very bad," says Thomas Cashman. "Why did you have your hood up?" asked Mr. Cooper. "'Cause it was raining," says Thomas Cashman. "That's the instance you were looking to go your brother's. You saw your brother and turned away," says Mr. Cooper. "That's exactly what happened, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. The court is then shown another angle of this event, and it shows the front of his brother Kevin Dunn's house. Mr. Cooper asks, "Do you see yourself?" "Yes, I can, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "Do you see your brother's car?" asks Mr. Cooper. "I can see a bit of it, yeah, it's a grey one," says Thomas Cashman. A third view is then shown. A man wearing what appears to be a blue top can be seen. "Who is that?" asks Mr. Cooper. "That's my brother, who has just come out of the house," says Thomas Cashman. "When you're looking down the street, you'll plan to go to your brother's with no interest in Mr. Nee. Then you go back," says Mr. Cooper. "Exactly what happened, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then asks of August 22nd, 2022. "What were you doing generally?" he asks. "It was just a normal, typical day for me. Out around the area, seeing people, collecting money, dropping off bits of cannabis, socialising, just stuff that I'd do every single day of my life," says Thomas Cashman. "Yes, I am. I'd just been to collect some money from Fincham Road, then to Woolbone Road, just money that was owed for cannabis," says Thomas Cashman. "Are you driving it?" asks Mr. Cooper. "Yes, I am," says Thomas Cashman. "Where are you going to?" asks Mr. Cooper. "I was going to my little mate's on the corner of Princess Drive, just to get some money from my mate who owed me money there, a mate who owed me money for cannabis," says Thomas Cashman. They then show him more CCTV footage of his van. Seeing this footage, Cashman says he is on his way back to his sister's house. He then says his little mate was with me. "During the course of the afternoon, is that what your business was? Collecting money you were owed?" asked Mr. Cooper. "Generally driving around collecting money, dropping off bits of cannabis. I may be going to me mates just to have a spliff or seeing someone for a minute. That's my typical day to day. That's what I do," says Thomas Cashman. If, for instance, there had been CCTV on the 18th of August, the 20th of August, whatever it may be, would that show any difference? Asked Mr. Cooper. If they went back on all the CCTV, they'd see me doing the same movements every day, going from home to my sister's to my brother's, seeing my mates, says Thomas Cashman. Are CCTV cameras common in that area? Asked Mr. Cooper. They're everywhere, yeah. I'm not sure of every single house, says Thomas Cashman. They then show him a picture of his van again and ask where he was going. He replies, to my sister's house. They show him the footage going into the address. Mr. Cooper then asks, do we see someone by the front door? That's me at my sister's house, says Thomas Cashman. We see another person walking to get cannabis. Who's that? Asks Mr. Cooper. That's me little mate, says Thomas Cashman. Why were you at your sister's house? Asked Mr. Cooper. It's somewhere I'd work from, says Thomas Cashman. Were you taking anything there? Asked Mr. Cooper. I went in and put a bit of money away, says Thomas Cashman. Did you collect anything? Asked Mr. Cooper. Yes, you can see on this image, but I just got to my sister's. My friend just left a bit of cannabis. I spoke to him through the car window. He got off. I went into my sister's then, says Thomas Cashman. He says it was around half a kilo at his sister's house. He also says, my friend left it with me. It's a normal thing I do. It's somewhere I'd always be. If I'm not there, then just leave it there for me, says Thomas Cashman. Collecting half a kilo of pollen from his friend Nicky McHale on Snowy Road. Why is his house being used this way? Asked Mr. Cooper. It started off, Nicky McHale was moving to his cousin's on Lark Lane. He said I could rent it off him. I was renting it off him. I'd done the house up as best as I could. After a couple of months, Nicky McHale came back down. He was staying on his auntie's couch on Princess Drive. I said to him, why don't you move back into your house then? I said, if you don't mind, I've been storing bits of money and cannabis there. He agreed and said no problem, says Thomas Cashman. I don't drive around with large amounts of cannabis on me. I haven't got a licence. It'd be dangerous driving, having no licence, no insurance. If I'm on foot, I can get away from them. Just in case, yeah. I don't mind driving around with money on me, but large amounts of cannabis, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman then confirms he has a key for the address on Snowbury Road. He says, I was getting half a kilo of pollen and taking a kilo of pollen to my brother's house, says Thomas Cashman. We've established your brother Kevin lives on Finch Lane, is that right? Asked Mr. Cooper. Yes, says Thomas Cashman. This is the start of the journey, says Mr. Cooper. I went from Nicky's, I went to my brother's, seen my brothers and turned round, says Mr. Cashman. They then show him more CCTV footage on Princess Drive. He agrees it is him walking across the street. He says, I've just come from Nicky's, going on the way to my brother's. I picked up half a kilo of pollen at Mr. McHale's house. When you turned away from your brother's address, where did you go? Asked Mr. Cooper. I went in Nicky McHale's to put the drugs away, says Thomas Cashman. These are the drugs you wanted to leave at your brother's. You couldn't, and are now taking them back to where you got them from, says Mr. Cooper. Yeah, says Thomas Cashman. The jury then shown the CCTV of Cashman walking on Mab Lane. Mr. Cooper asks, where were you going? Going back to my sister's house, says Thomas Cashman. It stopped raining. It was raining bad, but then the rain stopped. Looking at the CCTV, Mr. Cooper says, are you wearing a hood now? Says Mr. Cooper. No, I'm not. It's a normal thing, says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then suggests it's raining, hood up. It stopped raining, hood down. Cashman agrees. Are you trying to conceal your identity in any way? Asked Mr. Cooper. Not at all, no, says Thomas Cashman. Why are you going to your sister's? Asked Mr. Cooper. My van's parked there, and it's a place I would just go. Cashman has shown CCTV footage of him leaving his sister's in a blue t-shirt. Mr. Cooper asked him, did you change clothing? Yes, I'd just been out in the rain and I was soaking wet, says Thomas Cashman. I'd only had that van for a couple of months. When you were changed, where did you go? Asked Mr. Cooper. To my brother's house. I drove there, says Thomas Cashman. Why did you go back to your brother's? Asked Mr. Cooper. I wanted to go and tell the lads I'd been round, but my brother was still there. I just went in, had a split with them, and chilled for a little bit, and then I got off. I went back later in the day and told them to go round and get it from Nicky's. My brother weren't there then, says Thomas Cashman. There's a lot of movement by you, a lot of travelling around the locality. The different roads, different places, says Mr. Cooper. I accept that. It's my area where I've been brought up. It's not abnormal for me to do that, says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then says the prosecution allege the purpose of your movements was either for the reasons of planning and execution or the execution itself. He asks, What do you say about this? That's not true. That's not true whatsoever. You can check all the CCTV from weeks and weeks before. You'll see every day what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything different on this day, says Thomas Cashman. They then show Thomas Cashman the CCTV footage of himself in a blue t-shirt, and he is on Finch Lane. He says, "That's me coming out of my brother's." His van is then seen driving along King's Heath Avenue. Mr. Cooper then asks Cashman what he is doing at this time. "I'm not 100%, but I think I go to my mate's on Fincham Road. I think I just went and had a little split with him," says Thomas Cashman. They ask him what his friend's name is, and he says his name's Danny. They then show more CCTV of him on Finch Lane. I think this meant Thomas Cashman. "I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what I was doing. I can't say I was going from here to here to here. It was just a normal, typical day. There might be parts where he'd ask me what I'm doing, and I'm not too sure," says Thomas Cashman. "A mixture of cannabis dealing and socialising, would that be right?" says Mr. Cooper. "Yeah," says Thomas Cashman. Then his van is seen on Daysbrook Lane. When seeing this, Thomas Cashman says, "I was going home." The vehicle then continues down Grenadier Drive. At this point, Mr. Cooper asks, "When you go home, where do you park your van?" "Outside my house or on the drive," says Thomas Cashman. "You're quite comfortable driving it around," says Mr. Cooper. "Yes," says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then asks Cashman where he was going at 1840 on a different journey that the CCTV shows. "I've had time to think about this. I have seen the footage. I was home for about an hour. I must have had my tea, I think, because it was around tea time. I was getting my head together, trying to think where I was going after this. I was 90% sure I went to Argos to buy our baby toys because she wasn't well. She had tonsillitis. I buy our baby toys near enough every day. It's something I love doing. I'm seen 20 minutes later on East Prescott Road, where the Argos is," says Thomas Cashman. "You're at home having tea, then off to the shop to buy your kids some presents," says Mr. Cooper. "Yes," says Thomas Cashman. "Were you planning the shooting of Joseph Nee over your tea?" asks Mr. Cooper. "No, he was my friend. I was not planning to shoot nobody," says Thomas Cashman. Cashman says he then went to his brother's house before returning home. "I needed to tell the lads where to collect the pollen from," he says. His van is then seen heading towards Princess Drive on CCTV. Thomas Cashman says he's not too sure where he was going at this time. The CCTV shows Cashman's vehicle then turns into Snowbury Road. "I was going on to Snowbury. I stopped for 2 minutes. I don't know what for. I can't remember who I went to see," says Thomas Cashman. "Do you know people in this area?" asks Mr. Cooper. "I know everybody. I grew up in the area." He agrees he is well known in that area. He says he might have stopped to see somebody for a quick minute. "Anything to do with scoping the joint in relation to any planned hit on Joseph Nee?" says Mr. Cooper. "None whatsoever," says Thomas Cashman. "Any behaviour suggesting you were going to execute that hit during the daytime?" asks Mr. Cooper. "No. What you're looking at is typical of a lad who lives in the area and sells cannabis in the area, getting about from A to B," says Thomas Cashman. They show more CCTV footage and Thomas Cashman says he was going to his brother's house. "You passed your brother's house," says Mr. Cooper. "That road is a road that leads onto everywhere. I'm from Finchley. That's a road you'll see me on every day. You'll see everybody," says Thomas Cashman. "You say this is a general road you go down and up regularly. says Mr. Cooper. Every day, yeah. Every single day, says Thomas Cashman. They show more CCTV footage. What made me think I went to Argos is she weren't well, because I came from East Prescott Road and I always buy the baby toys. I knew in my head I went and took the baby toys. I went home for half an hour. I'm sure I was playing with the baby with the toys for half an hour, says Thomas Cashman. Are you planning on a gun hit on Joseph Nee? Says Mr. Cooper. No, I'm not, says Thomas Cashman. The CCTV footage then continues. It's clearly suggested by the prosecution that the planned shooting of this man is getting closer. You're doing all your work on it. Here we have just before 7:30 p.m. You're popping back home, says Mr. Cooper. That's right, yeah, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then shown CCTV footage of Joseph Nee's van travelling to Finch Lane. Did you know anything about that? Asked Mr. Cooper. No, I did not, says Thomas Cashman. The CCTV footage then shows Cashman driving away from Grenadier Drive shortly after 8 p.m. Where were you planning to go? Asked Mr. Cooper. I'm not too sure, says Thomas Cashman. Obviously at the time, you're taking journeys backwards and forwards to certain places. Were you aware you were going to have an account for every single trip? Says Mr. Cooper. No, I was just doing what I do most days, driving around my area, going from A to B, says Mr. Cooper. As the CCTV footage continues, Mr. Cashman says, I have people who owe me money in the area, or I'm just going to see a mate. It's one or the other. He then says he does not know why his van was on Finch Lane. He was quoted as saying, I couldn't tell you every movement throughout the full day. The CCTV footage then shows Thomas Cashman on Snowbury Road. I went to see my mate at Craig's house and spoke to him about arranging to pick something up, says Thomas Cashman. Your mate Craig, what's his surname? Asked Mr. Cooper. It's Craig Brine, says Thomas Cashman. Was there an issue or a matter that you needed to be resolved between you? Asked Mr. Cooper. I wouldn't call it that. We needed to go and pick up some money, says Thomas Cashman. What did the money relate to? Asked Mr. Cooper. Cannabis, from a mate who owes me in West Derby. Craig does the running around for me. He collects the money. He never does drugs. He didn't want to get involved in drugs, but he'll collect money for me, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman then says the plan was for him to be picked up on Asbest Road, at the top of the street where Mr. Brine's girlfriend lived. Where had you planned to leave your van? Asked Mr. Cooper. I needed to pass money to my girlfriend's brother for flowers for a funeral in the next couple of days, says Thomas Cashman. When did you do that? Or when were you going to do that? Asked Mr. Cooper. I was going to leave my van there. My girlfriend's mum and dad are very strict. I've been with my girlfriend for 20 years and that road is like my road. But from previous occasions, I know they don't allow me to have nobody outside the house. My plan was to leave the money for flowers and leave my van there, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman then says this did not happen in this event. He continues, I went to my sister's house, I had a spliff in my sister's house and lost track of time. I went to Asbest, parked my van up and got in with Craig, says Thomas Cashman. He come like 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later. He was then quoted as saying, his girlfriend's parents' dislike of having people outside their house. He often asked people to meet me on the corner if they want to come and see me. The court is then shown more CCTV footage of a Ford Transit Connect on Blackmore Drive at around 9 p.m. That's my mate's van, Craig, says Thomas Cashman. The vehicle is then shown travelling on Finch Lane. Are you in that van at the time? Asked Mr. Cooper. Yes, I am, says Thomas Cashman. I had a little moan at him for being late. It stunk of rubbish, says Thomas Cashman. Were you impressed? Was there a bit of a tense conversation? Says Mr. Cooper. No, I was not. I can't remember the words I said. I said, what's that smell? It stinks. He started laughing and said I had bin bags in the back. We stopped at a cemetery and got rid of the bin bags. There's big massive bins there. There's big massive square bins there. People from the area often go there to get rid of their rubbish. It's a cemetery, yeah, says Cashman. He then says he went to Craig's house. He then says we went to go and count some money. Were you getting closer and closer to the shooting during this time? Are you discussing in any way killing someone or shooting someone? Asked Mr. Cooper. No, I'm not, says Thomas Cashman. Did you get to Craig Bryan's home? Asked Mr. Cooper. Yes, we did, says Thomas Cashman. When you got to Craig's home, where did you go? Asked Mr. Cooper. We went upstairs to a spare bedroom and started counting money, says Thomas Cashman. How much was it? Asked Mr. Cooper. It was 10,000, says Thomas Cashman. Did you decide to go anywhere or do anything? Asked Mr. Cooper. We went downstairs. I done myself a spliff in the kitchen. Went in the back garden. I was having a general chit-chat with Craig. I can't remember what we were talking about, says Thomas Cashman. What time was it you went down to have a spliff in Craig Bryan's house? Asked Mr. Cooper. I'm not really sure. I weren't looking at my watch. If we're going off time here, that was 9:15. We're counting the money for 15 to 20 minutes. We had a chat for 10-20 minutes, whatever time that would be, says Thomas Cashman. Mr. Cooper then suggests that there would be a convenient time for a short break. So this will be the end of part 2.